Welcome to Watercolours with Caroline. This week on Masterworks we are going to do a still life by Paul Cezanne. It's some pears and a stoneware wine jug. So get your paints ready and get your drawing ready and let's paint together. Okay, so here's my watercolor, and here is Cezanne's oil painting. So we're going to try and replicate some of his texture with our brush strokes if you want to, but if you want yours to be more wet and wet, that's fine too. You know, you can do whatever you enjoy doing. I don't mind, you know, I don't mind if you make yours your vision and go for a smoother paint, but I found it quite liberating to actually replicate the texture, not have to make my paint kind of smooth. So I put my sample up there. We're going to start with the background and we're going to do it wet and wet, but we're not going to wet the jug and we're not going to wet the tops of the pears, so that we can work on those while the background dries. So we're going to mix up the paint for the background, which is going to be some lemon yellow if you have it. If you don't have lemon yellow, you can mix a raw sienna with a bright yellow and water it down to get that kind of look. And I think he's got kind of around here, he's got some raw sienna in his background, and here you can kind of see some lemon. So, you know, it's whatever you've got. So we're going to make a puddle of lemon yellow, a puddle of raw sienna, some phthalo green or viridian green. Either one will work, and some cobalt blue for this very light background. We want to keep it really light. We don't want these to be strong colors back here. We've got the same colors on the jug, but they need to be a little bit stronger on the jug. So keep it light, and let's get this over here. Let's put some protection there and let's mix up some paint. So I do have a lemon yellow. So I'll get that going. Lemon is probably the lightest yellow, or Hansa Yellow Light is very like a lemon. I've got that there. Now I want some raw sienna, or if you don't have raw sienna, yellow ochre will do. That will be fine. I'm going to use my 3/4 inch flat brush to get that texture, the brush stroke texture he has. If you don't have one, just use your round brush or use, you know, whatever flat brush you have, 1/2 inch. That's okay. So I've got my raw sienna. I'm going to mix up my Phthalo Green last because it's so strong. I'm going to do the Cobalt Blue next. And I've made both my pots of water dirty because I'm not paying attention. Let's grab some cobalt. And then I use Phthalo Green, but Viridian Green is fine. It's very, very similar. My Phthalo Green that I like is Phthalo Green Yellow shade. I do have some Phthalo Green Blue shade. I just prefer, for mixing greens, Phthalo Green Yellow shade. So I've got some Phthalo Green there all ready to go. And now I need to get myself, I've already made both my water pots dirty. I need to get another clean, because when we're wetting the background, it needs to be nice clean water. So there, I've got water right here. I'm all prepared. Grab another tub. I have been putting lids on my water tubs because I find they get filled up with dust really quickly. Even in a day, I get dust forming on my paint and my water pots. And so I've been putting, I don't like to close because my paints have, the only thing about these trays is they have paint in the lid and the base. So if you close them up, all of the paint from here sticks to the paint from here and it drips and dribbles. And I use M. Graham paint, which is mixed with honey, so it stays quite sticky. So I don't close them. But I have a piece of parchment paper and I cover them up with that during the week because it's amazing how much dust accumulates on those paint trays. That's just a little aside. Okay, I'm going to wet the background then. I'm going to use my round brush to wet the background because it's a little bit easier to get around those pears and things with my round brush. I'm going to use my number 10 bigger one. Clean water. So we don't want to wet the jug. I've already got hair on here. I didn't protect these. I've had those sitting there for a few days with nothing over them. So even these have collected hairs and dust. And I don't even have a dog or a cat. I don't know where it comes from. Probably just comes out of my paintbrushes. So I'm going to wet carefully around the jug. If some goes over, don't worry, you're going to outline the jug anyway, so it will probably be fine. And don't forget the little bit inside the handle here. Easy to forget things like that. And then of course when you get to this big area, you can be much more liberal with your paintbrush. The next place I want to be careful is when I come around the pears. You don't see still life painted as much anymore, but I know when I first started oil painting in my early 20s, everybody did still life. Everybody set up a jug and some fruit or a wine bottle. It was just what you did, and I found it really boring when I was younger, I have to say. I guess I've matured a bit since then. This is drying up quite quickly, so I'm just going to re-wet this little bit. And I tip it to make sure it's all wet. A little dry spot up here. And then I'm going to use my flat brush for texture and start with my raw sienna. There's not very much raw sienna in his background, but there's some just close to this pear, and I'm going with upward strokes, a little bit up here. And I think it's nice to have the reflections of the pear colors in this wall. I guess it's a wall, probably a whitewashed stone wall or something in a farmhouse building. So I've got that little bit of raw sienna on there. I'm going to grab just a little bit more. I don't want it too strong, but it does dry really light. I just grabbed a little bit more paint there. Now I'll wash my brush, and I'm going to grab the lemon, and it's okay for the lemon to mix with the green and the blue because that's going to give you some lovely different colors. But remember to keep everything quite light. As it comes over to the left, it's a lot more blue and green over here. I'll take a little bit of lemon down close to the table. Now, when I go into the blue, I'm going to save the Phthalo Green for last because it's a very strong color. Some of the blue and the yellow will make green, and that's fine. There's a lot of blue over here by the pot. Now the pot is sort of a burnt sienna color, so having blue over here is going to really show off the burnt sienna color, being a complementary. Now I've got that little bit in the handle there, and I'm going to use my number 6 brush to get in there because otherwise I'm not going to be able to. So I'm going to let a little bit of blue in here. I'm grabbing a tiny bit of lemon, so I have a little bit of lemon in there. And before it dries in that little spot, I'm grabbing a little bit of Phthalo Green. just popping it in there. It's drying quite quickly, that little spot in there. I have a little bit of phthalo green. Put some in this corner. This whole side is drying pretty quickly. I'm using my little brush to just get close to the jug. Now I've got a little bit of phthalo green on my brush, and this side's drying quickly, so I'm going to add a little bit. Keep it really light. Don't let that phthalo green overpower everything. It has to be well diluted and just minimal amounts used. And it's lovely when it mixes with the lemon. So now that side was drying, so I've got that in. I'm going to get a little bit more cobalt. Just want to get around that jug here, just so that it stands out before it dries. So a little bit more cobalt. It's a lot more lemony on the right hand side, so I don't want too much cobalt. A little bit in here. You can go right over the pear stem because you're going to put that in dark brown. It will go right over the top of those light colors just fine. You don't need to go around it or mask it out or anything. A little bit of cobalt up here, a little bit up here. It's lovely as the cobalt touches the lemon and makes a bit of green. And then I'm going to get a tiny bit of, the way I get a tiny bit, bring my paint tray over, is I just dip the tip of my brush in and then I wipe a bit off on this side that was clean so that I don't have quite as much paint on my brush. And there's some green up in the corner here, and a little bit of green down here. Nice thing with the flat brush is you can get a lovely crisp line along the edge of the table there, and you can get these brush marks that he put in his painting. A little bit of green there. Now don't overdo it. It's very easy to overdo this. It's a very light background. If your paper starts to dry, quit. Like, don't keep going on dry paper because you'll get wet blooms happening. And if you see a spot like I did in here that's drying quickly, get that spot done before it dries too much. And that's all I'm going to do to the background. I'm going to leave that to mix wet in wet and be nice and light and be a background color. Now I'll probably come back to my flat brush for the table later, but I don't want to do the table now because we can do this whole painting without using the hairdryer pretty much, because we can do all these pears in the dry and then move on to the pears that are just coming up into the wet, and then the jug, and then the background. We might need the hairdryer just before we do the background to make sure all the pears and everything are dry, but it will be minimal. What we're going to do next is we're going to do this bright little pear, again, right in the center here. And we've got beautifully offset the red and the green and the brightest ones right in the center here. So we're going to do this little pear wet in wet with the yellow first, and then the bright green, and then a little bit of a blue shadow on this side. So we're going to work wet in wet just on that pear. And that's I hesitate to put this on here in case I blot the background, but I think the black background's okay. Okay, so we're going to make some bright green using the phthalo green, the bright yellow, or you can use the lemon, either one works, and cobalt blue. So let me grab a brush. I'm just going to use, to make my bright green, I'm going to use the lemon that's there and just add to it. I'm going to add some of my Azo Yellow to it. And I'm going to, from over here, I'm going to grab a little bit of my phthalo green and add that to it. and Cobalt Blue. A little bit of, oops, that's going a little bit dark. I'm going to add a little bit more Phthalo Green to it. It needs to be a nice bright green. The Cobalt Blue is just to make it a little bit more greeny. I'm going in with a bit more yellow. I think that's pretty good. And then I want some bright yellow for the center of the pear. I'm going to just get rid of that raw sienna for a minute. And just get some bright yellow in there for the center. We'll be using these colors throughout. Like these colors keep repeating on the pears, and of course there's also some burnt sienna and some red. Right, that's a nice bright yellow. And then I'm going to use a little bit of ultramarine to shadow the left side, so I'm going to get that ready. And I know all these colors will be used again, so I want to have plenty. There we go. Right, wash my brush. Now, because I want to start with yellow, I want to make sure that my brush is really clean. Otherwise, it's going to start with green if I have a contaminated brush. So yellow, I'm not wetting the pear, it's quite tiny. And I'm just going to put the yellow on all over. It's so nice working on dry paper that's never been wet. It has a lovely crispness to it. So I've got that. Do you want me to zoom in a little bit? There we go. Now I'm going to go to a smaller brush. I think I need, let me just see. I'm going to go right down to my number 2 brush because it's quite a small pear, and I'm going into that bright green I just made. And that bright green is going to go around the outside of this pear. And it's going to flow into the center all by itself. So if you just paint along the perimeter of the pear, it will flow in by itself and you don't have to do much work. I have it. When I see how much it's flowing, I can add a little bit more paint. So he has a bit more green at the top here, so I'm going to add a little bit more there, a little bit more there. And then I'm just going to let the rest flow in all by itself. And I'm not going to put the ultramarine blue on just yet because it will flood everywhere. I'm going to let that do a little bit of mixing by itself before I go in with the ultramarine. And what I can do, I have lots of other pears with very similar colors. This pear here is almost the same colors, it just has a bit more yellow. I'm actually going to break with what I've got in my notes, and I'm going to try, just to experiment, I'm going to try lemon on this one over here. Just to try to see what I get, what effects I get. I'm going to also grab a bit more Azo Yellow. I've got the lemon on the top, and I think I'm going to go with you won't hardly see the difference on the camera. And I'm going to go with the Azo Yellow on the base of this one. So I've got one yellow that's a bit darker and a bit stronger than the other. All the dark colors will go on when this is dry. I'm still with my number 2 brush because these are kind of small pears. And then I'm going to get that bright green that I made. And again, around the edge of the pear, I'm going to start adding that bright green with just the tip of my number 2 brush. And I got the number 2 brush because I want to be very, very careful with how much paint I put on. And he's only got a little bit of green around here. not too much, and then some here. He's got quite a lot of yellow showing on this pear, and again, on this left side, he has a very dark shadow. I'm going to put that on later. It's a kind of like a burnt sienna shadow. And he also has a bit of a burnt sienna shadow underneath here that I will put on later. What he does have underneath is just a slight tinge of orangey red. And I haven't got any cadmium red prepared yet, but I will grab a little bit. I'll put it on my other palette. So when we put the blush on some of the pears, you can use any bright red that you have. I'm just going to use my cadmium red, and I'm also going to use some burnt sienna mixed with cadmium red to make a more browny. You know how some pears have more of a browny orange blush to them? So if I get my burnt sienna, it's hard to mix with number 2 brush. I should switch, but I'm on a roll here. So I'm mixing a little bit of cadmium red with some burnt sienna, and I'm getting a sort of a nice brownish orangey color. I'm going to grab a tiny bit of just the red, and I'm just going to put a little bit under here. I have to really just wiggle it in. I'm just wiggling my brush because my yellow dried up a little bit. I didn't prepare enough. Just wiggle that in under there, maybe here. Now, by now, this one should be ready for a little bit of ultramarine blue shadow on the left. Again, I just put it around the edge and let it, my green is still wet. Just going to let it flow into the green. A little bit here. If your green is too dry, don't do it on dry paint. Wait for it to dry, and then you can do it by using a wet brush to ease it in. But my green was still fairly dry. A little bit of ultramarine blue shadow on that side. Now we can just go through the pears one by one, looking at what colors he's used. Now this one, very little yellow showing, and this color here, very blue, like ultramarine blue mixed with your greeny mix. And then this is the green mix where we use the phthalo green, the yellow, and the cobalt blue. And this one looks like it has some ultramarine mixed in. And of course the browns are put on when that's all dry to give it some shape. But again, this looks like a very lemony yellow on this one, and it's practically all covered. There's not a lot of yellow showing, but there is some. So don't lose a little bit of highlight there. The other thing you can do is, if you lose the yellow, when it's dry, you can wash it back, because the colors we're using, apart from the phthalo green, will wash back. So plus it's your painting. If you want to make your pears look a bit different, that's fine. Right, my number 2 brush is a little bit small for the moment, so I'm going to move to my number 4 brush. And I am going to use lemon again for this one. And I don't think I did for the first one. I'm just experimenting. And of course with oil painting, you would put all the yellows on last, all the light colors. The whites, the yellows, the light colors would go on last. So we have to reverse the whole process of painting when we do watercolor. Move that over a little bit. I'm going to take some of the darker green. I've got my lemon on there, And my lemon's probably a little bit too dry to do this now. I might get a watermark, but you know what? I'm not going to fuss about it. I'm not getting a wet in wet blending because I left it too long. But I will risk the water bloom, and I'll put some water on to mix it, because I can always put some more paint on over the top to disguise anything that I don't like. And I actually think the yellow is probably dried almost enough that I won't get a water bloom. Use a wet brush to just smooth that in. And any water blooms I do get will be used as texture. Now I want to, I need a bit more space. I'm going to make another green, but this green is going to have not cobalt mixed with it, but ultramarine. So it's going to be the same as the first one. So some yellow, and then some phthalo green, and then some ultramarine to make a darker, stronger dark green. A bit more ultramarine. So that one's going to be a bit darker, a bit stronger. And he has quite, I'm going to grab even more ultramarine. He has quite dark green on this side of his pear here, making a lovely contrast with the light jug and the light plate. I'm going to have a dark center to this later, so I can go right over the dark center. And he has at the base of this pear some reflected light from the plate, so he doesn't go that dark all the way down. He does, however, on this side, he's got a reflection from this pear, and that's pretty dark right here. Now, he does not care about showing his brush strokes. You can see all of his brush strokes. And that was another thing the Impressionists were known for, was you could see their brush strokes. Whereas some of the painters before that era were very careful to get everything very smooth and blended. And that's the beauty of oil. It spreads like butter, and you can blend and you can blend and you can blend for hours because they stay wet for weeks. And you can use oil to blend with, so it's a very interesting medium. Let's put a little bit more shadow here. Again, I don't mind if people see my brush strokes. And I can put more shadow after that's dry. I will be doing a very dark center to the pear, and Cezanne did quite a lot of dark outlining. Not all the way around. You can see he had breaks here and there on the jug handle and on here, so it's not like outlined all the way around, a bit of a break here, but they do have quite a dark outline around them, especially around the plate. It's a very broken outline around the plate. Right, so I've got these ones over here, and I'm going to work on the one right in the center. And the one right in the center is a very, very bright yellow. So I'm going to use my Azo, but I'm going, oops, move it over a little bit, Caroline. I'm going to put, you can either use gamboge with it, or I'm going to put a little bit of cadmium red with it. I just want to orange it up just a little bit so that I have a much, much brighter yellow, or not brighter, warmer yellow. Let's grab my number 6 brush. It's a bit bigger pear. So I want to do yellow, that warmer yellow, just it's got a touch of red, or you can use gamboge if you want to. Gamboge is a warmer yellow. I'm going to put that all over that pear to start with. Love this pear right in the middle here. Such a bold pear. Now it's very, very bright on the right hand side, and I'm going to grab a little bit of my beautiful new Daniel Smith Indian Yellow, and I'm going to touch that to the right hand side. See if I can, no, it's not that bright, much brighter than the color I've just made. Very similar actually to the color I've just made. Now before that dries, I want to get some cadmium red on there for the blush on the pear. It's all near the base here, up the side. There's still a lot of yellow showing, so don't obliterate your yellow. And if it dries too light, like red dries very light, you can always go back in with a bit more. I'm going to take a little bit of that burnt sienna I mixed with the red and put it on this side here. It's a little bit darker on the left. There's a little bit of that brown. I've got very kind of dry brush here. A little bit of that brown up here, a tiny bit. And now there's I'm going into the lighter green that I made. A little bit of light green just here, tiny, tiny bit. And there's a little bit just here. And there's a dark shadow, but I'm not going to put the dark shadow on until this is dry. I want to just get that little bit on. Don't lose your yellow on this one. But if you don't get enough bright red on, you can put a little bit on when this is dry. Don't worry about it. You can always put a bit more on. I'm worried about putting too much, but I want just a tiniest touch more. I can go up into that green because there's going to be a dark brown shadow over there. There, and I'm going to leave it alone because I don't want to overwork that beautiful bright one that's right there. Now the ones on the right hand side, they have more dark colors on them. They've got more reddy browns and dark browns on them, but the three here are all worked with a yellow on first. Now this one probably not so much. This one's probably will work with like a raw sienna and red on first. It's one of those very rusty colored pears, but these three, it's the same process where you put the yellow on, and then this one has got the burnt sienna with red and your bright green. This one, the dark brown, will go on second layer, so don't worry about it in the first layer. You can put some green there, and then we'll cover it up with some dark. But again, the green, and this one's got a little bit of the red here and the light green, and all the darks can go on when these are dry, and any other bits of color that you need can go on when they're dry. So don't be worried if they don't look the same when you start them, and they're going to look very isolated on the white paper too. It'll look very different when you get the brown background on. So I'm going to sort of keep working along. I know be behind me, but you can stop me and ask me questions. I'll wait when I finish the next 3 pairs. I will wait for you, and before we do the rusty brown one, let's start with the one at the back. And just make sure that your background is dry enough that your colors aren't going to bleed. Mine's not 100% dry, but it's definitely dry enough that none of these colors are going to bleed through. They're going to be fine. So I'm using my Azo Yellow for this one. It's just a lovely regular bright yellow. And I'm going to keep, that's my number 6 brush. I'm going to keep that for the yellow. I'm going to use my number 4 brush to put on the green. I'm just mixing a little bit more bright green. I want that on the right hand side of this one. Oops, got a drip in the background. And there's a little bit on behind this one. A little bit there, and then I've got to go into that rusty red color. So that is the cadmium red and the burnt sienna mixed together to form a sort of rusty red. I actually have an actual color. I have colors I rarely use because I forget I've got them. This is, I think this is a burnt orange, which is exactly what I'm trying to mix. And you probably don't have that, which is why I don't use it. But I think it was called burnt sienna orange. Why don't I try that? And see what that does. It's a very nice color. It's a Daniel Smith color. And I'm just whooshing my brush now in the cadmium red to just pick up a little bit more red as I come down here. And it is going to be brown just down here behind the other pair, but I'm going to put the red on first and then go over it with a bit of brown when it's dry. Darker brown. And there is a darker green shadow, so I'm going to grab that one that has ultramarine blue in and just put a little bit of darker green here too. Now this pear is wet, so I'm not going to do the pear in front of it just yet. It'll dry really, really quickly because I'm working on dry paper. But I'm going to work on the one over here while that one is just getting dry enough to work on. Again, I'm switching back to my number 6 brush, which has the Azo Yellow on it. And we'll do this one here. And again, we want a little bit of, I'm just going to grab some of the cadmium red to start with. It has a very, very light blush. Oh, I need a bit more cadmium red, a bit dry. Grab a little bit more. Yeah, it has quite a light blush on it on this side, quite a lot of yellow. It comes right up to the center of the pear. And then there's green on this side. There's quite a lot of yellow showing on this one. And a green here. and it is quite light on the right. I'm just I've got my damp thirsty brush, and I'm actually going to lift a tiny bit of my Kleenex, tiny bit of the yellow on the right side, just to lighten it up a little bit. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going back to this one here, which I let it dry before I got the next layer on, and I'm going to grab some, it's fairly dry now, I'm going to grab some yellow, and I'm going to do exactly what an oil painter would have done, which is put the light color on after the dark, and I'm going to brighten up that one a little bit. Because I had enough light paper showing, it will give it a nice yellow blush that I kind of lost by letting it dry too much before I got the second layer on. And then I'm just going to wait a couple of seconds to make sure this one is dry before I do this one. And this one has got lots of dark shadow, which I'm not going to put on at this moment. It will go on later when we mix the dark browns. But I will do the base color. Yeah, I'm just going to give it, it's almost dry. I'm going to give it a couple of minutes, and you'll need a couple of minutes anyway to catch up to me. As it's starting to dry, I'm just going to maybe smush this about a bit with a thirsty brush, just to get a little bit more blending, just a little tiny bit. Now I can see on camera that it looks quite bright. It's not quite as bright in real life. The camera's giving it some bright hues there. Also, the daylight change, my window is right beside me, and the daylight changes constantly, kind of changes the color of things on the camera. I'm just going to grab a little bit more yellow paint. And I'm pretty sure that one is dry enough that I can work on this one. And again, even though it's dark brown, very dark brown on the left, I'm going to put the yellow on first. I don't know much about Cezanne. I forgot to research him extensively. I think I watched a little video about him, but I've forgotten a lot of what I watched. I don't think he was that interesting. You know, some of them have quite interesting lives, and some not so much. I think he's the one that sort of fell out with his parents because of who he wanted to marry. I think his parents were quite wealthy, and they were not impressed with him wanting to marry. I think maybe his model. I'm not sure. I'll have to watch it again. Don't quote me on that. Right, so I've got the yellow one. I'm going to go in with the dark green. It's got quite dark green on this one. The green that I mixed with the Ultramarine Blue and the Phthalo Green. I need a little bit more Ultramarine Blue that I think is not quite dark enough. Grab a little bit more. And I'm going behind that brown one there. Now what I'm going to do for the first brown layer is I'm going to use that reddy brown color I'm just using a damp brush to blend that in a little bit. Yeah, I've got that reddy brown colour, and I'm going to use that as the first layer. And then I'm going to go over with a darker brown, allowing some of that, little bit of that reddy brown to show through. And also it'll help me make the dark brown darker. When I put it on there, it won't be so transparent and light. Anytime you put red over green, you're going to get a lovely, lovely dark colour. The complements will form a beautiful dark colour. And that dark goes all the way down here. So I'm grabbing, some of it is the orange, burnt orange sienna. Some of it is the burnt sienna mixed with the cadmium red that I'm putting on. And I'm just grabbing a little bit of cadmium red here too. And then I will put the brown on over the top of that when I get to it. I'm using my thirsty brush to just blend that a little bit, because of course he didn't blend a lot of his oil strokes, but some of them he did, especially on these round pears. When it's dry, I'm going to lift a little bit of highlight off of there when it dries. And you can see where I've put the reddish brown over the green, it's gone very dark very quickly. So if we struggle to get a dark brown on here, we can always add some green as well as some brown to make it much, much darker. And then we have this lovely sort of russet pear over here. I'm going to put this is the raw sienna. So I'm going to put the raw sienna on first. Just sort of, I'm not right up to the edge because I want to get a nice strong colour at the edge. And then I'm going to take that burnt sienna mixed with the cadmium red and put that around the edge and let it blend with the raw sienna. And make sure that your pear behind it is dry. I'm going to grab a little bit of the cadmium red just by itself, and I want a little bit of red coming in here, just cadmium red. A little bit more of the burnt sienna with cadmium red. And a little bit of the just burnt sienna by itself. A little bit more of the burnt sienna, and then a little bit of the cadmium red. Now you're probably going to need a couple of layers of colour because this is quite deep in colour. And my raw sienna dried really quickly. I'm going to grab a little bit more raw sienna on my brush and add a bit more because it dried too quickly to get a nice blending there. A bit more cadmium red. And there'll be some dark brown put on when this is all dry. Just like the other ones are going to have some dark brown added to them. So I was a bit slow, my raw sienna got a bit dry, so your raw sienna for your base layer needs to be fairly wet so that everything else is going to mix with it wet and wet. Try and get close to the raw sienna This is just my cadmium red, and my cadmium red is not, it's not really wet, because otherwise it will flood into everything. So it's fairly dry cadmium red, and I just want it to blend with that raw sienna and burnt sienna. Now remember, pear skin is quite rough, so I'm not trying to smooth out a lot of these colors. I'm trying to keep them fairly rough, and you know, they get those sort of bruisey looks on them. I've got a dry brush, so I had some cadmium red on that brush, and I dried it off on my towel, and I'm going to scrape a bit of dry brush just over this one again to get that rough sort of texture on the pear, and even on this one here, a little bit of scraping just with a dry brush. Get a little bit of texture. This one has a bit more. Now that it's dry, I can add a little bit more texture to it. And of course this one's going to have a lot more dark on there when that layer's dry. I'm wondering if, I think I can get my little tiny brush that's going to lift a little bit of color. This is called an eradicator, this brush. It's specifically for lifting color. It's nice and tiny. And I want to lift a little highlight just here. So a little bit of agitation with a damp eradicator brush. And then a dab with the Kleenex. And I've got a little highlight there. Maybe there. It's just a small one, but there's a definite highlight in his. I'm kind of curving it just around on the pear. And also when we do the jug, there's a lovely highlight here and here, which of course he would have put on with white paint at the end. We can put it on in several ways. We can either wet that area and not paint it but let it go soft, or we can leave that area dry, or we can use our white Dr. P.H. Martin's white afterwards, which is so much easier, so especially for a curved white like this one that he would have done with the quick slurp of his brush with some nice flake white paint. So two things after that pear, we're going to put a little bit of blue shadow on the plate, and then we'll work on the jug. The jug has got lots of beautiful colors in it. The jug is literally reflecting all of the pears, the sort of the background. It's got every color in that he has used. He's got all the burnt siennas, the raw siennas, the blues, the greens, the browns, all of those colors in the jug, so it harmonizes with the rest of the painting, and yet it's very subdued at the same time, as well as reflecting all those colors that are in the painting. And the white plate is very white. Just a little bit of shadow on it. So I'm gonna, for the shadow on the plate, I'm going to use a little bit of Cobalt Blue. You want me to zoom in even further? That might help. A little bit of Cobalt Blue on the tip of my brush, and it needs to be fairly watery. Quite watery. I'm adding a little bit more water to it. As you know, where the plate dips down here, and the shadow from the pear here is such a little bit of shadow on the plate. Tiny bit under the pear. And then it comes around here. Now we're going to have a little bit of darker shadow on afterwards. It's just a little bit of cobalt. It's so subtle in his painting. And then there's a shadow between the pears here. It does get a little browner, but we'll put the brown on after the blue. It comes under this pear here. And kind of here, and just a few little brush strokes there. It's darker on this side. Everything's darker on this side. And it comes across the plate here. And under this pear. And we will make that a little bit darker with the brown later. And then there's a little edge. I think I'm going to grab my... It kind of feels to me... Oh, here we go. Let's go back a bit. Other way, Caroline. This is like one of those butcher trays, you know, it has like a blue edge to it. Kind of feels like it's, you know, it's a tin plate. We used to call them butcher trays. And the edge is actually sort of an indigo blue. Kind of feels like that sort of a plate. It may not be, but it has that feel to it. Put that away. Anyway, the edge is kind of rough, and I'm just going to use the cobalt for now. And you can see a bit of the edge here. And then it's almost like it's got a bit of denting around the edge or shape. It's not smooth. And that could just be the way he did his brush strokes, you know, just a little bit here, a little bit. Sorry, I zoomed out again to get my butcher's tray out. Now that's step one. Step two will be to put a little bit more shadow on the left and really dark shadow under the plate. Oh, there's a little bit of shadow here, you know, where the plate dips down. And I'm going to make this a little darker here. And it's quite dark under this. We're going to go darker under that pear there. The actual back here before it comes to the table. Oh, no, I blurred that. There's a little bit of white plate showing between this shadow and the table. Is a little bit of white plate showing. Where I went over that pear does not matter because I'm going to go over that with, I'm going to go over it now, with some dark brown. I'm only doing that because I just got that blue on there, but you don't have to rush to do that. I'm just going to go over that blue. A little bit of dark brown there. And of course all the background is going to be dark too, so it will really make everything stand out. Just because I'm really, really impatient when I'm painting, and I do love to get to the next step. I want to put the center of that pear in. And a little bit of brown on the end of it. It's almost like I can't stop myself. I want to get there. I want to get that part of the pear done. And a little bit of burnt sienna. A bit of lighter brown here. Go to my little zero brush. I'm going to take my dark brown paint on my zero brush, and there's a little bit of dark brown shadow in here too. I'm just going to pop that in. It actually looks like, looking at his, there's almost like a center to the plate there. A little bit here. That bit slightly darker brown there. And when I got the dark brown, it's quite dark brown under here, but he doesn't go all the way. He sort of has the thicker shadow here, and then it really thins out. And it outlines the rest of the pear with the dark brown, and it comes around here and meets this dark brown. And then of course we'll do the background to outline it with dark brown on the background. So that was my Ultramarine Blue and Burnt Sienna mix for dark brown. I've just got some Burnt Sienna, and I'm just sort of extending that center of the pear a little bit with some Burnt Sienna and my little zero brush. And you can see how it starts to take shape. It's not just sort of green blobs anymore. The more we put some detail in like that, then the more it's going to look like pears. What I've got now is my brown mixed with a little bit of ultramarine blue to just make a kind of grey for some of these parts around the plate, and get a little bit of that dark, for just a bit more dark shadow here, so that I'll show you what I mixed. Let's pull back a bit so you can see my palette. So right here I have the ultramarine blue and burnt sienna making a dark brown, and here I've got the ultramarine blue, and I took a little bit of that dark brown and I mixed it with a little bit of that ultramarine blue, and I got a grey colour that I can use for the browns that are not, or the blues that are not so brown. And we're going to need a lot of dark brown, especially for the background, the table. So I'm going to mix up a little bit more. Mine's getting quite dry. Just grabbed a little bit more there. And then I'll zoom in again because we are going to work on the jug. Let's move the jug across. And like I said, this highlight in the front of the bulbous part of the jug, you can leave it dry, you can wet it, or you can put on white afterwards. I think in my first one I left it dry. Sometimes that's really tricky to get it in the right spot, and you end up losing it. If you wet it, sometimes all the paint can go into the wet spot. So you decide whether you want to wet the highlight first or leave it dry. It's a tough decision, I have to say. I'm still of a mixed opinion what to do. I'm going to switch to my number 8 brush. And the lightest color on there is the raw sienna. So I'm going to start with the raw sienna, and I'm going to put a little bit of raw sienna on the opening here, a little bit of raw sienna on the jug handle, and then the handle's actually light all the way down one side, so let's pop that on. And I'm going to add a little bit more water to my raw sienna so it doesn't dry up too fast. And you know, the hardest thing is remembering where that highlight is. So I'm going to paint it in with my brush first, and then quickly, because I don't want it to form a line, I'm going to quickly come up to where I painted it in. Now, a large part of the jug is this raw sienna. I don't know if I'm going to worry about the white line that goes at the bottom here. I'll probably put that in afterwards. And then there's some dark brown here. Grab a little bit of dark brown, and then I'm grabbing a little bit of burnt sienna, both on my brush at the same time. And that dark brown comes up the side here. It's very, very dark on the left-hand side. We're going to darken this with more paint. Just getting the first layer in right now. Then there's a little bit of green here. And it goes at this, I think there's a raised symbol on the jug, maybe the jug maker. So I'm painting my green around that like he has. A little bit more of my raw sienna. I'm going to blend the raw sienna. Little bit of cobalt blue. A little bit here, a little bit of cobalt blue. A little bit here. A little bit here. I'm grabbing some cobalt. I'm not washing my brush, by the way, because I want to make sure I have lots of colour on there. I don't want lots of water on my brush. And a little bit more dark brown here. Grabbing some dark brown behind this pear. And coming up here, a little bit of dark brown. Around that. I think the symbol comes all the way around here. A little bit of cobalt blue. You can see the brush strokes. And it comes inside that highlight. I think I did manage to leave, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to leave that highlight, but I think I did manage that. And then I'm going to use my I'm drying my brush all the time, using my dry brush to blend those brush strokes in a little bit, but you can see his brush strokes, so grabbing a little bit more raw sienna, a bit stronger here, a little bit of burnt sienna. Don't go too dark with the jug because it is quite light. Little tiny bit of green. I've got a very dry brush. I keep wiping it on the towel to dry it off a little bit. A lot of colours in here. I'm going to grab some burnt sienna, just burnt sienna. Oops, now I do need to wash my brush. And I think I'll switch to a number 4 actually. Getting up to the neck of the jug, burnt sienna on my brush. And there's some on this side. there's going to be a dark line under the neck, but we'll put that on after this is dry. And now I'm going inside the lip here. And it's going to be again dark when that's dry. A little bit here. I'm going to grab some more burnt sienna on my bigger brush now for this side. And again, we do want to see the brush strokes, so my brush is fairly dry. I'm going to go darker up there. So I'm wiping my brush on the towel and then sort of scraping those brush strokes down. And grab a little bit of the green. A little bit of the green here. A little bit more of the Cobalt Blue. And then I'm going to grab some of the, it's going to do a little bit of brushwork on that. I'm going to grab the dark brown, and that goes under here, very dark under the handle. And down this side, it kind of widens as it comes towards the handle. That dark widens out. And a little bit more burnt sienna on my brush. And again, I'm going to mix that burnt sienna against that dark. To strengthen the colour up a little bit. Back to my dark brown. And he hasn't outlined the whole handle. There's some dark here, some dark here. There's a little patch of dark there. It's a little bit at a time. There's a strong patch of dark coming under the lip of the bottle. Quite strong here. A little touch there. Bit on the inside. And we can do a bit more detail when that's dry. Don't want to do it all at once, but we can put a little bit on now. There's a tiny bit of Cobalt Blue on the handle here. I'm putting it on and then I'm like washing it in with a wet brush so it's not too strong. A little bit of cobalt there. I'm going back with a little bit more. Washing it in there, and then there's a little bit of burnt sienna, quite strong on the edge here. Each one of these colours is quite a small amount, quite subtle. I put it on and then I use a damp brush just to lightly wash it in. A little bit more ultramarine blue just here on the handle. Again, wet brush to just blend that in. And then the dark brown coming down here to form the edge of the handle. And there's some on the inside too. Up there, a little bit there. And now I'm going to go to my 0 brush and the dark brown, which you can either use sepia or you can use ultramarine and burnt sienna. Either one's fine. There's a couple of little like dippity marks on the bottle there. There's a couple here. And again, he hasn't given much clue to what is on the bottle here, but there's definitely, you know, some kind of a built-in design here or symbol, and he's just very impressionistically done a few brush strokes to indicate that. And the same down here. There seems to be some kind of a circular symbol made in the clay of the pot, and that shows down here. And then again, I'm going back over this dark brown shadow here from the, it's very dark here from the pear and the plate. And of course, this is very light back here. So when you've got light, you can have dark. You can have dark edging against light. So he's got some edging around here. And this is the very dark brown I'm using. It's not a smooth line that he has. It's a broken line. It's a bit here. It's a bit smudgy in places. And it comes down here and down back here. I'm going back to my number 4 brush. And now that this dark brown here is dry, it's not anywhere near dark enough. So I want to put more over here. It's in transparent watercolor. If you're doing it properly, it usually needs a few layers to get a dark. Otherwise you just have mud. You don't have a lovely clear transparent dark. And layering different colors over the top of each other also gives you a very interesting dark, because you can see a lot of the colors underneath. I'm using a wet brush to transition those strokes because I don't have oil paint. I can't blend them. I have to use water to blend them. I just want that edge to be a little bit softer. I'm going to grab a little bit more green. And it's a little, the green's a little stronger just here. I'm going to put a little bit of stronger green there. And again, use my wet brush to do a little bit of blending. And then I'm going to pull back a little bit. Now your jug should not be too dark, and it will look much lighter once we get all of this, all of the dark table in. It's going to look much, much lighter. Now what I can do before I do the dark table, and when I'm just kind of waiting for you, I've got that dark brown, and I can put in things like these pear stems that are sticking up. Now I'm going to put the burnt sienna on the right. Obviously his light is coming from the right, and then I'm going to get that dark brown, and I'm going to put the dark brown on the left. I'm working on dry paper, so they're not going to be too wet and wet blendy. And then it comes down to sort of a dark dip in the pear here. I'm going to do a little bit of outlining, and he's got a little bit of outlining here. Again, it's not all the way round. It's just, you know, he's got some splodges here and then a break, and then there's the dark table. Same, I'm going to do the same for the this one. A little bit of the burnt sienna mix. It's a bit of the burnt sienna mix with the red there. Now the dark brown. Bring the stem down. It comes down past the tip of the pear. And again, that dark brown, and he has some outlining. It goes thick, then thin, and a little bit thicker, and then of course we have the dark brown table. Same with the other side. It's a broken line. To do some of these other ones while I wait for the jug to dry and for you guys to catch up a little bit. Now some of the outlining of them I'm not going to bother with, because we're going to do a dark table behind them. But ones like where it's on the plate here, I'm going to put some outlining, and I'll need to put some more shadow on those. And every time you think you've got it dark enough, it dries and you realize, yeah, you still need to go a little bit darker with some things. Especially like behind here, I'm going to add a little bit more dark behind there. It really is very dark. This little one here, this one wonderful little one, I'm just going to use my dark brown. I've added a little bit of ultramarine blue to it to make it even darker. This one's super dark. I haven't got the super dark shadow on yet. Starts to come alive, doesn't it, when you start to put a few stems and a few shadows in. Now, this one here, add a little bit of blue shading, and I'm going to do a little bit more. I'm just going to take Cobalt for this one, and I just want to put a little bit more Cobalt Blue shading there. And blend that in. Did that pair there. Okay, this pair here has a little bit of brown shading on it, so I'm going to use my burnt sienna and ultramarine blue and put a little bit of brown shading on this one. I'm going to put it on and then blend it in. So it has a hard edge right now, not very pleasing. So I'm going to get a very clean, slightly wet brush, and before it's too dry, just going to soften that edge in. I'm going to grab a little bit of red and add a little bit of red to that shadow so it's not too dark. And then I'm also going to add a little bit of blue. Up here it's much more blue. I'm going to just drop a little bit of blue in here to vary the shadow from top to bottom. I started with brown, added a little bit of red at the bottom, a little bit of blue at the top. This one has a little bit of shadow. Again, it's my ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. Oops, I got a big blob of water on there. And again, a wet brush, I'm just softening it in. This one. So this pear is throwing a shadow on the pear behind it here. Of course, our shadows are fairly translucent, whereas his would have been very opaque. We are working with different mediums, so we have to do it differently. Again, wet brush, a little bit of blending. Oh, remember this guy here, he's quite brown, isn't he? I'm going to add a little bit of red into that brown. And I keep dripping water on it. Great. And of course the blue. I'm mixing up another brown with the burnt sienna, the blue, but a little bit of red in it. I'm going to try that out. Yeah, it's just a bit of a warmer brown. I've got my number 4 brush. And I want to get some shadow on this pear. It's very, very dark. And I did make that little highlight. Maybe try and keep that. Now, before I go too far, I want to get my wet brush and lighten this as it comes around the pear, so it's not a distinct line. So we're easing it in, and I want it that side of the highlight. And then it gets darker. You can barely see the center of the pear there, it's so dark. And bring it around. On here and behind this one. And wet brush. And a bit more water. And soften this in. If I don't do the wet brush and soften it in, I get much too harsh an edge to that line. I can have texture to the line, but I don't want it to be too harsh. And I'm sort of bringing it up and curling it around the pear, the line that is. A little bit on this side. And this pear is going to have some outlining too. And I know it looks really dark, but my goodness, his is dark. It's very, very dark. And we're going to have a dark table. So a lot more of the outlining can be done with the dark table. This one here, I'm debating whether to put this on now or after the table. I think I'm going to put the shading on this one after the table is done, so that it stands out more. And all that we have left to do now is the table. A little bit. So I'm going to start with my raw sienna and my bigger brush. I want to get I need a bit more burnt sienna actually. I've used most of it up. Oh my goodness, I've got to squeeze some more burnt sienna and some raw sienna. So but raw sienna and burnt sienna first in quite large amounts, and a large brush. If you don't have a square one, use a nice large number 10 round or something. Yeah, we're going on dry paper. It's easier to get around those little pears without messing up, and We don't worry too much about seeing the brush strokes because we can really see his. Try and just keep them all, you know, horizontal. You may not get dark enough in the first wash, and you probably won't. Oh, do you know what I just said? I said keep it light here, didn't I? Let's get a bit more raw sienna. So I want to keep it light there. I'm going to put a dark shadow under the jug when this is dry, but I want to have that reflected light from the jug. So you can't get all of the dark in all at once. We'll get the raw sienna and burnt sienna first. Now I'm going to have to use a smaller brush when I want to get between these ones here, because I'm never going to get between here with my flat brush. So I've got to do the main part with my flat brush and then come in around these with my little brush. Now you have to be very careful, because if your mix dries up too fast, you're going to get brush marks that you don't want. Now we don't mind about seeing some, but we want some that sort of makes sense. And it's very light at the moment. I'm getting a little bit more burnt sienna on my brush. No water, just burnt sienna on my brush. And I'm bringing that into the light paint. Oh, my hand is covered in paint. I don't know where it's come from. Now I'm going into the darker brown. And as I'm going around these, I've got grab the darker brown. It can mix wet in wet with my light brown I've got here. And I've got my smaller number 4 brush. And none of this is dark enough yet. It's all still pretty light. And as I come back here, I've mixed my dark paint with a little bit of burnt sienna and a little bit of water, so it's not too different, and they can mix wet in wet back here, but I got to get back there before too much of this dries. And as I go back here, I can get darker. Be really careful as you go around your pears. Try and keep this tabletop fairly straight. This is the tricky part, these little tiny spots back here. And this, while this is still wet, I'm going to grab a little bit of Ultramarine Blue and brown. And while this is still wet, I can add a little bit of shadow in here and under the plate. It's still wet enough to put that soft shadow in around this pear. Now I'm not worried too much about the background here and here, because I can come back to that without worrying too much about a wet edge. I'll do that in a moment. My number 8 brush, I think. More dark brown. I mix a little bit more burnt sienna with the dark brown. And we're going to come back here for this part. We're going to have to do it fairly fast to do wet and wet. Can't believe how much paint I got on my hand. I have no idea where I got it from. What happened there? I'm very, very careful. I've got the point of my brush and I just went over the pear there. The nice thing about these two colours is they wash off really well. So if I do go over an edge too much, I'll wait till it's dry and then I'll wash it off. But I'm going to try and be really careful and get around them as carefully as I can. And back and get a little bit more shadow here. And a little bit more here. Grab a little bit of blue. Blue makes a good shadow. So this is a bit more blue here. And don't forget, shadows make an elliptical shape. They don't make a very round shape. Even if you've got a round fruit like an apple, it still is more of a elliptical shape for the shadow. Again, I'm coming in with the shadows here. This one doesn't have too much of a shadow. I've got a lot more dark to put on yet. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get that little bit of paint off of there. I'm going to turn it up this way because I want to do that last little bit without making a mess. I'm getting my hand in wet paint. Grab my number 6 brush. That's quite dark, so I'm going to get a little bit of ultramarine blue, more ultramarine blue in my mix with the burnt sienna, but a little bit more blue in it to darken it up. And we're going to go back here. And don't forget, you can turn your paper, your painting board, any way that you want so that you don't dip your hand in wet paint, and so that you can keep painting with ease. I tend to keep it the same way up for the camera, but in this time I have got to turn it around. I'm going to have a really big mess. And make sure this line is pretty straight. There. I know it looks weird upside down to you, doesn't it? There, I've rotated the camera, which means I can paint upside down. Oh, the miracle of modern science. I can paint upside down, but you get to see it the right way up. Isn't that weird? Oh, I think it's weird. Anyway, so I've got that darker paint, bigger brush, number 8 brush. And this side is dry enough that I can put in the darker paint. Oh, I need a bit more blue. So I can put in the darker paint over here. Oh, it's still more blue. It's quite a blue shadow over here. Actually, I'm going to just grab a little bit of green as well, a tiny bit of green, to cool that shadow down over here quite a lot. I'm sure he would have grabbed a bit of his green too. And grab a little bit more. There we go. Just grabbing a bit of that phthalo green really, really helps darken the shadow up, but keep it very transparent, or translucent, I guess we definitely can't see through the whole thing. Now the disadvantage I have now is my reference photo is the right way up, but my painting is the upside down. And I'm going to just wet my brush. Now I've got a very hard line there, but I don't think I don't want to wash it in with water. I want to wash it in with paint. So I'm grabbing some more burnt sienna. And I want that little bit of light and then darker paint. I don't know if I've actually captured that light very well. I'm going to turn it back up the right way now so I can actually work on it the right way up. Here you go. Hold on to your hats and turn you around. There you go. I'm going to go back to my flat brush and I'm going to use my flat brush a bit more. He actually had a lot of his brush strokes coming downwards and not horizontal. I kind of, for me, we've got all these vertical brush strokes here. I kind of like having the horizontal in contrast to all of the big vertical brush strokes he has back there. So, I mean, it's up to you. I'm making my own decision here. I'm grabbing a little bit of red for here. I'm going into the red on my palette. And also that rather lovely burnt orange color. And I'm deepening now these colors in the tabletop, probably a wooden tabletop, I'm imagining. And I'm picking up a little bit of everything now. I'm picking up a little bit of dark brown, a little bit of reddish brown, a little bit of burnt sienna. It looks very red in the camera I'm looking at, but a little bit of, grabbing a little bit of raw sienna. He would have probably used yellow ochre. Maybe I'll grab a little bit of yellow ochre. It's a nice opaque color, and I might just add a bit of that here because it's the last color going on. I'm never too worried about opaque when it's the last color. You're not going to be in danger of making mud so much. Oh, I've got lots of colors here, a bit more dark around here. And I do not like how I left that light here. I need to scrub it back with my brush, I think. And I might, I've scrubbed it back a bit, but I might need to go back over it later with a little bit of shadow. A little bit of blue here. Has a little bit of blue here. And I'm grabbing my cobalt. Has quite a bit of blue here. A little bit of blue here. Of course, there's the elliptical shadow from the jug. And then that little bit of light. There's put a bit of blue in here. And I'm just, again, washing with my thirsty brush. I'm just washing that little bit of light out there. There's also a little bit of light here. And again, those colors, the ultramarine and the burnt sienna, they'll wash back for you all the time. They're easy to wash back. They don't stain. So it's one of the reasons I use them a lot. I'm going to wash back a little bit of light just there. It may be too light, in which case when it's dry, I will put a little bit of raw sienna over it just to take it down a notch. But as it is right now, it's okay. Also, when I've put the dark on this pear, I think I will need some ultramarine blue shadow around it when that is done too. Now what I'm going to do is, so I can finish this pear for you, and I know you're probably way behind me, I'm going to just dry that with my got so much junk in this hairdryer, so I can actually just finish that pear for you and put a little bit more shadow around the pears using the Ultramarine Blue. Okay, right, so I'm going to mute for a minute so I can use my hairdryer. And now you can seldom do a dark background in one layer. It's very, very difficult. And what I said about that light being too light, I'm going to take some raw sienna, watered down, and I'm just going to just put a little bit of watered down raw sienna on those highlights that I sort of wash back, but they're a bit too bright. Now I want to put the dark on this pear here and then quickly dry it and then put some ultramarine blue shadow around it. I want to add some red and green to the brown so that I have a different brown to the background and a complementary pair of colours. So I have quite a messy brown here. I'm going to get some phthalo green and some cadmium red, which together will make quite a nice brown, transparent one too, and add a little bit of burnt sienna and a little bit of ultramarine blue. So I've got different colors in there for the brown, and it's going to be a bit more of a reddish brown because I've going to add another little touch of cadmium red and another touch of phthalo green. It should be a different color. And then I'm going to get some, let's make a clean space here. I'm going to get some ultramarine blue for the final sort of shadows. Ultramarine blue is just on its own over another color. It's just a lovely color for a shadow. All right, so first of all, I want to have some shadow on this pear. So that color I made with the red and the green, which is quite transparent, I'm going to put on this pear here. Wet brush to thin it out a little bit as it comes over the top here and into the light. It's definitely not as dark, so I'm watering it down. And it's quite dark as it comes down to the tabletop. And again, wet brush to get that softer look to the shading. There's a little bit of a highlight showing, which is what I'm trying to get here. Add a little bit more green to the mix because we have that reddish brown pear, so just having green over the top is going to give us a lovely dark, lovely transparent dark with that phthalo green or a viridian green if you have one. Again, wet brush to soften those shadows. And I'm going to dilute that right down. I'm just diluting it down for with water for the shadows on this side. They're much, much lighter. Now when that's dry, I'm going to add a little bit more reddish brown to it because the reddish brown has lifted quite a bit with that layer. And I think it's going to need a bit more when it's dry. I'm just grabbing some of that reddy brown colour right now. And maybe I'm just going to add it wet and wet at the same time. And so remember, this one was really dark, and now of course it's got the dark background. It might need a little bit more on it. That's a little bit more dark. And I'm going to grab just my ultramarine blue. It's nothing else, just ultramarine blue, and use that for a bit more shadow under this one. Behind that one. And maybe a little bit more ultramarine blue for this shadow here. And pretty dark shadow under this plate. And that's what makes it really stand out as a lovely stark white plate to get some good shadow underneath it. I'm mixing my browny green and my ultramarine blue, and again I think we need a bit more shadow around here. He's got it dark around here. And you can see his brush strokes. And definitely that shading under these, a shadow between these two. And you can see how the ultramarine really gives you those final good deep shadows. A little bit around here. And of course when this one here is dry, a few more, definitely some more ultramarine back here. Because you've got the dark on the side of the dark brown on the side of the jug, so you need to have that blue shadow, otherwise your jug, the dark on your jug won't show up. You've got the brown on there and then the blue, so you'll have that little bit of complementary happening. There's another little lightness there. I'm just going to lift that little bit of light there. Probably too light now. And we still have a couple of stems to do, don't we? There's this stem here. So I want to get that really, that dark green, red, brown that I made. It's really dark. I'm going to put that stem on there. A bit more shading there. I did that stem. Probably still need a little bit more shading on the other apple there. Trying to see if I've missed out any stems. I don't think so. I think we've got most of them in centres. I think one place that does need, I'm just going to use the ultramarine blue. I think we need a bit more shadow on this one here. Not quite dark enough. And I'm just using ultramarine blue to give that a bit of shadow. So some have a brownish shadow, some have a bluish shadow, some have a slightly greenish shadow. And again, just looking to see if I've missed any shading. That could maybe have a little bit more green. I have a little bit of green there. A little bit more blue. And this one's almost dry. I would, if I had more time, I would dry this one and wait for it to dry, but I'm just going to push ahead right now and with the Ultramarine Blue just put a bit more shadow here. It's very difficult to get dark against dark, so to do it you need to use a complementary color so that they show up as the shadow comes in under that one with like a triangular shape coming in like that. Shadows are really dark near the object and then they lighten out as they come out. A little bit of water helps that. I'm reluctant to use too much water because the Ultramarine Blue and the Burnt Sienna lift really easily and they're not particularly dry, so they're lifting really, really easily, so I don't want to use too much on them. Anytime they look like they're floating and not grounded, they probably need a bit more shadow. And Ultramarine Blue is your friend. All I'm doing with these is just some Ultramarine Blue. A little bit to that side. A little bit of water. There we go. That was a tough one. It's just a few pears on the table, but it is quite tough to take an oil painting and do it in watercolor in 2 hours. And I'm sure you didn't manage to keep up, but I hope you can get it finished eventually. Well, that was a bit different, wasn't it? We haven't done a still life for a long time. I hope yours turned out okay and you enjoyed doing that. We've got one more left next week. We're going to do a local scene, Little Qualicum River, photo sent to me by Deborah. So we'll get to that next week and I'll see you then. Bye for now.